Rain, thank you very much indeed for agreeing to make this video with NRAS this afternoon. You've read NRAS's report, Work Matters, and you're of course aware of the government's plans outlined in their Green Paper, Improving Lives. What are your immediate thoughts about the findings of both reports in regard to the CBI's members in terms of their understanding of the kind of problems faced by people with fluctuating long-term conditions like rheumatoid and JIA?
Well, I think it's so great that we've got this report, Work Matters, to really help employers think about how they can make accommodations for their employees and their future employees who might have long-term health conditions. I think when you look at the moment, we know that 1 in 3 people of working age are living with some form of long-term health condition. And I think we've made great strides in starting to have the conversation about how employers can make adjustments. But I think the big challenge is having the information in the first place. And I think this report does a valuable job of setting out some of the information and guidance for employers so they can have some of those conversations with their employees. And hopefully it'll make it easier for people to raise concerns they have, any sort of long-term health condition they have, whether it's rheumatoid arthritis or adults living with JIA or any of these other many different long-term health conditions that people can have. I think the first job is often just having that conversation with your manager about the issues you're having and thinking about how your world of work can change to adapt to that.
In regard to disclosure by an employee, which can often be very challenging, especially when they first go for interview and those early stages of a new job, one of our recommendations is that intervention with an employee at an early stage to create a flexible and supportive working environment will be beneficial for both parties. What, in your view, should the government and other statutory agencies be doing to get that important message into the sort of psyche of business directors and business owners?
Well, look, I think the more that we can use some of the organisations like the CBI and other trade associations that are working with a range of businesses across sectors to try and get some of that information out there. And I think what we've really noticed is businesses are very keen to have more of these conversations. I think the priority that businesses are putting on health and wellness of their employees has become even more important. We recently did a survey of over 350 businesses, and what we found in that was over 2/3 thought that health and well-being had become more important to their organization, and over 80% said that this was important to their overall business as well. So I think people are having the conversation, but I think often employers aren't sure, particularly if they're smaller, about what they need to do to make it easier for people with long-term health conditions.
Given that we know how important the role of the line manager is in supporting an individual, it can kind of make or break that individual's life, if you like. Do you think that employers should be incentivized in some way to incorporate training of the workforce in how to support people with long-term conditions?
I think one of the challenges we know is out there at the moment that businesses do invest a lot in training, but actually that the overall proportion that they've been investing in training isn't increasing as fast as it should. So I think businesses need to be investing more in training, a full stop. And I think an important part of that is supporting line managers. When we surveyed businesses around mental health, we found that half of businesses were providing support for line managers in how to have conversations with their employees around mental health. That's just one illustration, I think, where we've made a lot of progress probably than where we were 10 years ago, but I think it shows that there's still further to go in terms of providing support for line managers, because I think, as you say, often, when you either discover you have a long-term condition, it's a really stressful time. And it's also really scary. And I think sometimes the hardest bit is broaching that conversation. It's how do you initiate that with your line manager. And I think it's also making it easier for managers to ask the right questions early on so that employees feel able to be open early in their diagnosis.
Another recommendation in the report is that there needs to be clear signposting to sources of help and information, particularly for small to medium-sized enterprises, because we know that they particularly struggle. They don't have HR departments, and they struggle sometimes to know where to go for help.
I think where we can help is providing, links to some of the sources that are out there already, either in terms of what the government guidelines is already being developed, but also I think sometimes it's about bringing businesses together to discuss the issues, and whether it's the CBI or some of the other trade organisations, I think bringing businesses together can certainly help. And I think the more that the issue I think is discussed in the public domain, it encourages smaller businesses to ask the right questions.
So can I assume that when we've created some of our online resources for employers, that you'll be happy to help us get that information out there to them? That would be incredibly helpful from our perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the reasons why we wanted to play a role in publicising this particular report is it's one way of showing some of the guidance that is out there, what is best practice, and almost facilitating that conversation between people and their employers. And I think the more we have the conversation, we more spread the message, and also help to direct to some of the government resources that are out there. Because I think one of the challenges is people don't know about some of the resources that are out there, from work access, from some of the other government schemes that can help people with disabilities either re-enter the workforce or make sure that people are staying in the workforce. I think that's another role in which businesses can play.
The Access to Work is an incredibly useful scheme for both employees and employers, but it seems to be a fairly well-kept secret. And I was wondering whether you thought that these kinds of schemes should be highlighted, for example, in staff handbooks. Would that be something that could be helpful?
The more ways we have of getting the message out there that there are government-supported schemes from Access to Work and other schemes like that is helpful. I think staff handbooks can be one way. I think one of the challenges, though, is there can be a bit of a tendency to staff handbooks to be read once and then sort of left on a shelf. I think really it's about making it easier and having a culture within organisations where employees feel like they can raise issues on a regular basis, having work environments where flexible working in some sense is the norm rather than the exception. And that people feel they can have these conversations on a day-to-day basis. I think we need that culture change piece, and then we also need to make it easier for smaller businesses and businesses of all sizes to access information that's out there, either from government or from the good work that charities like NRAS and others do to support people with long-term conditions.
One of the things that came out of the report, and actually came out of the previous report we did 10 years ago on work, was the fact that people are taking holiday in order to go and have medical appointments with their GP or their consultant in the hospital. Do you think that's right?
I think most of the kind of leading organisations, I think most sort of best practice business organisations do allow employees time off for medical appointments, either if it's for themselves or for people who they have caring responsibilities, whether that's children or elderly parents. I think having that flexibility is something that's important and is more likely to mean that people will be more dedicated to their role and better able to do their job. There's nothing more stressful than having to juggle medical appointments either for you or for people close to you, and at the same time trying to feeling like you have to justify that to your employer. I think most managers have a mature approach to it, but that's certainly where we would want to be.
We're living in an age now when the population are living longer, not necessarily more healthily, sadly, and pensionable age is increasing. So we're going to be seeing older people with more levels of disability in the workforce. In your mind, how critical is it that we move towards a society where that's the norm? And workplaces are more accepting and flexible and adaptable?
I think it's absolutely vital. I mean, the one thing we know is we're facing an aging population. We're all working longer. We're all living longer. And I think what we're seeing is the choices people are making is they want to stay into work. They may not want to be working full time and in an office that they commute in every day as we age. But the good news is there are lots of technologies to make it easier for people to work from home, to work part-time. And I think that's the way in which we're going to make it easier and adapt to a world in which we do have an aging population and we have more people who have long-term health conditions. But I think we'll also find it more rewarding for all of us as people. We want to stay engaged with the world of work. We want to feel we're contributing, that we're productive, that we're contributing to wider society, and that we have a sort of social fabric, and work is often at the centerpiece of that for a lot of people.
Rain, I'm aware that you've got a daughter with JIA. We've been talking about adults and the difficulties of adults with RA and JIA and other similar conditions. But as a parent of a child and needing to be able to take your child to medical appointments and so on, how have you found that with your own employer, the CBI?
Well, yes, I have a very bubbly 9-year-old who has been diagnosed with JIA since the age of 3. And I think first of all, I'm very lucky that my employer has always made it very easy for me to take time for medical appointments, either for me or for my daughter. So it's been really easy to support her, and that's obviously taken a lot of the stress of managing her condition away. And I'm very lucky my team have always been really helpful. If she's ever had an emergency appointment, we've all pulled together to make it easy for me to be there. And I think that's part of working at a place where everyone values the work that we do, and it makes me very loyal to the organization that I work for. And I think that's so important. Even as a working parent, I have 4 young children. I need to be able to work from home. I need the flexibility with my hours, and I think that's really what the modern world of work is about. I think the other thing is it's made me, change my view around disability and what that means. I mean, my daughter on one level is disabled, but then on another level, she's an incredibly active young girl. And so, disability can affect people in so many different ways and at different times of the year and differently from week to week. So I think, again, it comes back to flexibility and making it easier for people to work hard when they're able, and making it easier for them to take a step back when they're finding it harder to manage their condition. And again, it comes back to this flexibility, whether you're a working parent, whether you're a carer, or whether you just need to take that flexibility in the world of work anyway.
One final question, Rain. Our mental health report talks about anxiety and depression and how common this is in rheumatoid arthritis and JIA. Do you think that employers understand how to support people with mental health conditions, especially when they are attached to long-term conditions, long-term physical conditions that may not be so visible?
Yeah, we've been, over the past year, we've really tried to have a focus on and have a proper strategy around mental health awareness and helping our managers, but also our employees, talk more about mental health and be more open, but also think about ways that we can make adjustments as an employer. I think we're not alone in that. I think a lot of businesses are thinking a lot more about mental health and the well-being of their employees more generally. I think we're still at the beginning of that journey, but I think it's certainly encouraging. One of the things that we found from a survey we did of businesses is that back in 2013, you only had 1 in 10 people who were raising a mental health issue with their employer. By 2017, so just over 4 years, that had gone up to 40%. I don't think that's because there's been a huge increase in mental health incidents. I think it's because people feel more open. I think we've seen it in, both in public, but also in the business environment. I think people are starting to feel more confident and able to raise challenges they might be having around mental health, as well as around physical health. And I think people are understanding this is about the person, and the two kind of go together. I think there's more to be done to think about what sort of flexibility people need and how we can support people in the world of work. But I think what's encouraging is that conversation is happening more and more.
Rain, thank you very much indeed for talking to me this afternoon. Thank you.
All right, thank you.